Great shot, Ron.
Hi, we're going to be talking about the Fletching Arrows today. And in the video, you're going to see that we use an epic arrow that I used from Easton for years ago. It was a light arrow, jumped out of the bow quickly, would smack those pheasants great at 5, 10, even 15 yards. I have solely gone to an axis arrow now, and I'll explain this pink a little later on. But I use an axis arrow, which is a thin diameter, heavy arrow, 125 grain tip. I was finding that I was able to drop pheasant out 20, 25, sometimes 30 yards, which even amazes me that I can get a shot like that off. So I needed a heavier arrow, and that's why I went with axis all the way around. And this one I chose with the blue and white because you can really see that one feather's considerably shorter than the other, at least a ½ inch, maybe a little more, and it slides right off the rest. If you were to choose a spiral wrap that you've seen on some flu arrows, I've never seen a wrap that stops an arrow in flight faster than a flu. It's almost too much for hunting. It'll take the speed right out of that arrow, plus the spiral wrap really slams against the arrow rest and bounce. These don't, these just feather right across. That's why I taper them. And we'll explain that in the video. So watch the video, the concept's all the same. Just remember, I've gone for a heavier arrow now, an axis arrow with a 125 grain tip, because I'm sticking birds out pretty far. I mean, when I get one at 30 yards, I fall down, I go, holy mackerel, I can't believe I made that shot. Hopefully you'll have the same success. So anyway, enjoy the video and thanks for watching. Hi, I'd like to go over arrow building here, some of the things that I use. I use a Bitzenberger fletching tool. It's one of the finest fletching tools in the world. I'm using Fletch Tight glue, and we're going to use Aluminok to finish our arrow. I get full-length pink dyed hunting arrows. I like to use fluorescent pink. I also use fluorescent blue. I found that both of those colors show up really good in the field. I remember one year I got invited to a turkey property that I haven't hunted in the past, and I went out there all excited with my pink feathers, and the field was just covered with pink flowers. And there's never the perfect fletching, so I couldn't miss that day, or I'd never find my arrow. So we're going to take these feathers, and I pre-cut those with the thick end. I cut it about 4½ inches, and then I cut the other length at 4 inches. So I'll have 3 at 4½ and 3 at 4 inches. And the reason I do that, I stagger my feathers. We're going to get a little cleaner flight with that flu off of the arrow rest. I'd like to start off by first putting the shorter feather on, which is the 4-inch feather, into the clamp. And I've pre-marked a mark on my vise where my tail feathers will always be, and what you need is proper clearance for your fingers. It's usually 1 inch, 3/4 of an inch, something like that. I line my feather up to where it's at my mark, and we're just going to place a nice little bead of glue onto the feather. We heel, putting the rear end of the feather onto the arrow first, into the vise, push it down, and the key is not to push so tight that you squeeze the glue out. You just need that little bead and a nice little pressure on the vise, and let her go, and it'll be dry in about 15 minutes. While we're letting our feather set, I'd like to discuss some of the advantages with fletching arrows at home. One of the big pluses is you can customize your own feathers fletching like I do for my flus. Again, I stagger my feathers, so I have 3 longer feathers and then 3 shorter feathers. So I don't have a whole clump of feathers coming off my arrow rest, and I get, I believe, a cleaner arrow flight. The bad news is you kind of become the neighborhood fletcher. So all your friends that are into archery will bring by their arrows for a repair or from fletching. You never run out of glue, because I always tell them if you show up with some feathers, you better bring a fresh tube of glue, and I always have glue. And usually you'll get a couple free lunches, maybe some drinks or a dinner out of it. Earlier we talked about the arrows that I love to use. I use the Axis N-fused carbon for my hunting arrow. This is a thinner diameter, it's a heavier arrow, and it has great penetration. And I use that with a Magnus 4-blade tip, the Stinger, which is a cut-on contact. This is a great arrow for all my target shooting as well as hunting. It has tremendous penetration, and it's extremely durable. we're using the Epic arrow for our flu-flus, for aerial targets. And the reason we're using the Epic is it's one of the lightest hunting arrows you can get. It's 7.3 grains per inch, which means the arrow jumps out of the bow quickly. It'll hit with a tremendous speed at that 10 and 15 yard range, which we're looking for any type of aerial shooting for pheasants or targets, because that's our range, 10 to 15 yards. And after 20 yards, it has no kinetic energy because there's less weight in the arrow, and it just peters out, and it literally parachutes into the ground, making it much easier to find opposed to a heavy arrow, which would travel farther and bury in the grass. Now that our glue is dried, we're going to move on to placing the second feather on. I simply remove the clamp, and this particular fletching tool is set up to move at 120 degrees, putting 3 feathers balanced around the shaft. I'm going to move it that 120 degrees, and then I'm going to move it back 60, just eyeballing it. That's one of the reasons I like using this fletching tool. It's so easy to operate. I'm going to load that second feather, the longer feather, in. Now, I started off with the short feather for a reason. The last time we fletch this arrow, we're going to have to be bending a feather. And it's much easier to bend a short feather than it is a long feather. So, we're going to glue this feather up. Place it in, and we'll come back in about 10 or 15 minutes and it'll be ready to move on. Now that we put on our third feather, which we're halfway through the feather, I go back to the shorter feathers and just so on and so on. So it's short, long, and the last one will be long. Go right to the nock where it is set for that 120 degrees. Heel the arrow, push it down to the shaft, let her go. Now that we've got our sixth and final feather to go on, this is the long feather, we literally turn the vise, and remember I told you that short feather comes in handy because we have to bend the feather to get it at that 60 degrees. Put it in, and this is our sixth and final feather. We just let her glue up. Now that we've got our sixth and final feather glued on, we're going to remove the clamp, and we're almost done with the completion of this arrow. The other thing that we do to get that Pro Shop quality, or better than Pro Shop, is we also prepare the shaft really good by cleaning it either with isopropyl alcohol or acetone, and we get it what they call squeaky clean with like a paper towel. When it squeaks, you've got no oils on it. The other thing that I like to do is I take my Flex-Tite and I put a little drip of glue right on the tip of the feather. Just a little drip right down, and drag it down the shaft a little bit. Each feather gets a little drip, and we're covering the tip of the feather. I also do it to the rear of the feathers as well, which is fairly quick, just a little drip. And this locks, it's called locking the feathers. This will help protect it, especially the front when it comes off an arrow rest. So we're going to seal our glue back up, and I just let the arrow stand like this up against the wall. Come back in 15 minutes, I'll put one more drip with my flu-flus, and this arrow is ready to shoot. Well, we're almost completed with this arrow. The last and final step is I remove the nock. I pull that out, and we're going to replace it with a Luminoc. Just dump it on the table here. We're going to place this in the tip, and sometimes we get pretty lucky that we get the right fit. It should be a firm fit that you can't push in without regular force. And I have a good light. If I didn't have a good light, I would pull it off, and I could use this squaring tool, which is actually made by Luminoc. And the beauty of this is you can actually do it with fletched arrows. And you would sand the tip to get a nice square tip so you get a good connection in the carbon. Place it back in, and we're ready to go in the field. In video 4, we're going to show you how to cook your prize. You went out hard, you spent the money, the time, the effort, and you got your pheasant. Now let's cook it up right. A friend of mine, world-class chef, he denies it, but he actually was partners with Narcy David in a restaurant. Narcy David's a famous food critic on the Western United States, and he got this recipe. It is to die for. And sure, it's for pheasant. You can use it with any fowl that you want, and it will blow your friends away. And it's really simple because I like to cook good, but I like to keep it simple. So thanks for watching. One of the new videos I have coming out is going to be never lose another arrow. Now these are Axis shafts from Easton, bulletproof shaft. This is what I'm using for pheasant now because now it's a heavier arrow and it flies a little longer and faster. I'm able to tag my pheasants out 20, 25 yards. I've done as far as 30, which blows me away. When I hit a bird 30 yards away, I fall down the grass and start doing like snow angels. I can't believe I did that shot. But that's what these arrows do for me because they have the weight and the speed to get there. I'm going to show you why we paint the shaft. Kerry, a buddy at my club, came up with this. It's been invaluable for finding arrows. I'll show you how that works. We use Luminox, which really brightens up, especially in low light. You can see it a mile away in the field, which is fantastic, helps you locate your nocks. The feathers I use, we'll talk about flight and why we use them. And I also put pheasant scent on my feathers before I go hunting. So if all else fails, I put my dogs on my arrows, they go through the field, they point my arrows. I've never lost another arrow. We'll show you how that all works. All right, thanks for watching, thanks for supporting. Remember to hit all the bells and whistles, all that kind of stuff. I think you guys know what to do. Subscribe, you probably already, hopefully you're subscribed. Thanks again for watching. See you in the field.